Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Welcome to another Friday, week 33. If you wouldn't believe it, June has started well. Montreal's weather is hot and cold, sunny and rainy, so can't complain with anything. Um, Today's chapter is a bit on the heavier side, if I may say so myself. So, and it ties quite well from the last week's chapter about resurrection and the day of judgment and so on and so forth. So we can see a theme. The early sections were all about charity and love and compassion, uh, focusing on the directly practicable actions of an individual. So if you want to give to the poor, you could give today. If you want to be nice to the orphan, you can be nice today. If you want to be charitable, you could be charitable today. There's no restriction, there's no temporal distance. You could do it right now. Get up from your seat, grab a piece of fruit, go out on the streets. If you live in a city where there are beggars, go hand them a piece of fruit, come back home, charity done. The first, I would say, quite a few chapters were on this: be nice to the orphan, be caring to the poor, and so forth. And in the midst of that, you've seen, as we've discussed, two themes happen. One is this compassionate, pious, loving human being side, and the other is reckoning of the day of judgment. Woe betide you, and uh, all that warning of this the end is nigh type of rationale or argumentation, shall I say. And now we're seeing that in 33 chapters or so, now that the compassion and love and empathy have been sufficiently discussed, not that they won't be discussed again, but they've been sufficiently discussed, now we will talk about this other thing that we have been mentioning over the last few chapters. And you see it more and more coming to center stage in all the chapters. Um, because if any of you have been fishing, or any of you have ever taught a class or convinced somebody of something, you never go with the hardest sell in the beginning. You go with the gentle approach, and you slowly reel someone in, and then you expose the complete idea, the complete philosophy. So that's happening here. That happens in all religions. And I mean, religion is an ideology, or it's an idea. So you can't start by saying, "Oh, there's a day of judgment and everyone's going to die," and if you don't do that, no, that's not how it is. You have to open up the mind of the listener gently, and tell them what some of the central themes are, um, and then you can start getting deeper and deeper, like all religions do, and this one will as well. It's only chapter 33. It's a total of 114. So you can imagine we're going to be here for around 80 chapters or so, a bit over 80 chapters. So yeah, that's very, very important. Um, there's also something I'd like to mention, because I will mention it at the end, and that is a point of concern that I have with Islam, and that concern is its exclusionary or exclusive aspect of it. And a lot of my friends, uh, not only the atheist ones, but also friends from the Christian faith or Hinduism or um, agnostics or deists, they've mentioned the same thing to me, that Islam, the way it presents itself, it's very exclusive. If you leave it, this isn't in the Quran, I haven't found it, but it's in the common belief about Islam, and a lot of Muslims believe it too, that if you leave the faith, i.e., apostasy, the punishment is death. But I haven't found the argumentation for that in the Quran, but I'll look into it more. And there's a I wouldn't say a vast majority, but there is a group, there's a substantial population of Muslims who always argue that Islam is the best religion, and Islam is supposed to convert all religions to its way of thought. Now, as a Muslim, fair enough. As a Muslim, I see where you're coming from because you feel this is the best way. We are communicating the best way to the rest of the world. However, objectively speaking, we are still looking at it through the lens of being a Muslim, and we can't separate ourselves from it unless we gain some critical distance. And to do that, first of all, you have to stop surrounding yourself by Muslims so you get exposed to different ideas and you say, huh, so Jesus said this, and Vishnu said that, and Prophet Muhammad said this, and Moses. Oh, interesting. Oh, so you're not all bad, are you? And then they'd say, oh, no, and you're not all bad either. Oh, no, we're not. So what's the commonality? That's what I'm trying to do here. I was a friend of mine who was raised Catholic. She told me this. She watched one of my videos, and it's so lovely to see, because I probably know 5% of the Catholic faith, and she was raised in it. And she talked about spirituality and God's nature and getting to know God, which is exactly what finding God means. I'm no proponent of a religion or being an authority of it, but the goal is to understand God. If you can understand God, you can understand the rules that govern each religion. So I seek opportunities like this. Another friend of mine is a religious Catholic. I don't know if he's Catholic, but Christian. Carl Sean Watkins, a lovely friend of mine in the US, and I was on his show a couple of months ago, and we just went into a deep dive on God. And he came from the Christian perspective, and I came from the Sufi or the Muslim perspective, and it was a wonderful discussion. So the goal here is to find common ground. Okay, because at the end of this chapter, I'm going to read a footnote, and this exclusionary aspect of Islam is going to come forward. And whoever listens to this today, or whoever might listen to it 10 years from now when I'm a politician and tries to find dirt on me, what I'm trying to tell you here is I am critically looking at it. I can't change the religion of Islam. I have no authority to do that. But I am very much open to critical examination of the religion. I promise you. And beyond faith-based discussion, we can have a rational discussion of whether it should be exclusive or inclusive and how one can navigate those boundaries. I'm going to read, and then I'm going to read the footnote because it's a 50 verse chapter. The chapter is divided into a few sections. So the first 7 verses are about oaths by the messengers of God and that the day of judgment is inevitable. Then it starts going along the lines of woe on that day to those who accuse Muhammad of imposture. So people would always say, oh, Muhammad, you're an imposter. You're a false prophet. You're lying to us, all those things. So woe on them. And then talks a bit about the history of infidels in the past. Then talks about God, the creator of all things. Therefore, whoever accuses God's messenger will be woed. Then the woe of those who have been cast into hell for calling their prophets impostors. So you see the theme is consistent. It's not jumping around and covering a wide subject matter like some verses do. This is consistent. The joy of those who did not call their prophets impostors, and the infidels of the time of Mecca, soon to be overtaken by the woes of the day of judgment. So that's how the chapter is divided. So I'm just going to read it, and I'm going to read at the end, and I'll just pause in the middle. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, by the winds, or angels, or the messengers of God, sent forth one after another, and by the winds that blow violently, and by the winds that scatter clouds and rain, and by the verses of the Quran that separate the right from the wrong, and by the angels that bring the revelations to the messengers to cut off all excuses or to warn. Surely what you are promised must come to pass. Then when the stars lose their lights, and when the heaven is cleft asunder, and when the mountains are blown away, and when the messengers are gathered to their time appointed, For what day are these signs postponed? For the day of sorting out the men of paradise from the men destined for hell. Now, man is used as an arbitrary, gender neutral term as it is in all religious texts. So we don't need to dive deep into the gendering of it. And what will explain to you what is the day of sorting out? Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. So this verse will repeat. Wailun yawma idhin lil mukazzibin. It repeats, okay, throughout. Did we not destroy the ancients? So shall we make later generations to follow them? Thus do we deal with the polytheists, disbelievers, sinners, or criminals? Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. Repetition. Did we not create you from a despised water or semen? Despised water. Can you imagine? Can you see? Even today, we don't look favorably upon it, even though that is the seed of civilization. Without this despised water, quote unquote, semen, there is no life, right? You can't impregnate a female to give birth. Uh, but even today, you don't say, oh, well, let's keep it in a bottle and worship it. No, it's still despised water. It's a very interesting use of the word. Did we not create you from a despised water? Then we placed it in a place of safety, the womb. I love that. I love how, because see, the problem is when we are inside the womb, we don't have consciousness of it. And we're just in our fetal position and just taking nourishment from our mothers and just we don't have understanding of it. And once we're out, our only perspective of the womb is from the outside. Even doctors, they can't mentally or physically, physiologically go inside the womb and feel it. But it's described in the Quran as a place of safety. And that safety does not only have to mean physical. Now, it does also mean physical because for the fetus, the womb protects it from everything, provides its nourishment, gives it warmth, gives it what's the moisture and so many other things, oxygen, gives it so many other things. But it's also metaphoric safety. It's also emotional. It's also figurative. That's why loving your mother is so damn important because your mother is your first abode in the entire world. So I love how the Quran has done this. Then we placed it in a place of safety. I love it. For a known period determined by gestation, as we know, around 9 months. So we did measure, and we are the best to measure the things. Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. Have we not made the earth a receptacle for the living and the dead? Yes, we have, God. And, and have placed therein firm and tall mountains, and have given you to drink sweet water. Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. It will be said to the disbelievers, depart you to that which you used to deny. So the deniers of the day of resurrection, I've mentioned this before, have always said to Prophet Muhammad, used to say to Prophet Muhammad, when is this day coming? Show it to us. So, you challenge somebody all the time to question their line of reasoning. That's a human tendency. There's nothing wrong with that. But the challenge, as far as I've understood, wasn't a genuine, oh, show it to me, and if I see it, I'll convert. Because if one is in that state of mind or in that stage of conversation, then they don't need this particular large brand of miracle to be convinced. They can be convinced in other methods too, like so many others were at this time. Depart you to a shadow of hellfire, smoke ascending in 3 columns, neither shady nor of any use against the fierce flame of the fire. Verily, it, hell, throws sparks huge as Al-Qasr. Al-Qasr is a fort or a huge log of wood, as if they were yellow camels or bundles of rope. Imagine, wow, sparks the size of a large camel. Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. That will be a day when they shall not speak during some part of it. And they will not be permitted to put forth any excuse. We discussed this last week, remember? Or 2 weeks ago, when your body parts will speak for you, but you wouldn't. to put forth any excuse. Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. That will be a day of decision. We have brought you and the men of old together. So this is the belief in Islam that all those who have come and all those who will come, all those who have been on this planet will be raised from the dead and gathered on the day of judgment. So that's what it means. Brought you and the men of old together. So if you have a plot, use it against me, God says. Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. Verily, the pious shall be amidst shades and springs, and fruits such as the desire. Eat and drink comfortably for that which you used to do. So they will be rewarded. That's the main message. They will be rewarded because they were pious. Verily, thus we reward the muhsinun, or the doers of good. Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. You see the repetition. It just goes. And in Arabic, it's lyrical. So it's like, Wailun yawma izil lil mukazzibin. It goes, it's very lyrical the way it does it. O you disbelievers, eat and enjoy yourselves in this worldly life for a little while. Verily you are the polytheists, the disbelievers, the sinners and criminals. In Arabic, the mujrimun, which means those who commit a crime. Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. And when it is said to them, bow down yourself in prayer, they bow not down, offer not their prayers. Woe that day to the deniers of the day of resurrection. Then in what statement after this, which means the Quran, will they believe? This is the chapter. So you see how it goes again and again. Woe that day to the deniers. So they're invoking that day and they're referring to the day of resurrection and contextualizing everything. So this whole chapter is about them. Now, when it says they don't bow down and don't offer prayers, there's a footnote and it says, narrated by Anas bin Malik, God's messenger said, I have been ordered to fight the people till they say La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but God. And if they say so and perform prayer, like our prayer, face our direction, of which is the Kaaba, now it's the Kaaba, and slaughter as we slaughter, then their blood and property will be sacred to us, and we will not interfere with them except legally, and their reckoning will be with God. Narrated Maimun bin Siyah that he asked Anas bin Malik, O Abu Hamza, what makes the life and property of a person sacred? He replied, whoever says there is no God but God, faces our direction of prayer during the prayer, performs the prayer like us, and eats our slaughtered animals, then he is a Muslim and has got the same rights and obligations as other Muslims have. This is from Sahih al-Bukhari 1/392. Now, this is what I was referring to, the exclusionary aspect. So, you say that there's no God but God, you pray like us, you pray in the direction that we pray, which now is the Kaaba in Mecca, and you eat the slaughtered animals that we eat. If you do this, you're a Muslim and you're one of us. Other religions also have some exclusionary aspects. I'm wrong, or I'm not completely right, or maybe something is missing in my understanding of the world, of God, of spirituality, of religion. It's very much possible that I'm mistaken and I'm wrong. Because my belief is always to extend a hand of friendship, love, compassion, empathy, understanding, common faith, good faith. My belief is always that. So I never criticize anybody's set of beliefs. Never. I've met people who are Satanists, atheists, agnostics, deists, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Jews. I've yeah, there's a few religions. Buddhists, Oxford, I met a few Buddhists as well. So I've met quite a few. I've never said to them, your faith is wrong, my faith is right. I've never tried to shoot holes in their arguments, because if anybody wanted to shoot holes in Islam, they could do so very easily. So I don't believe religion has to be subjected to that scrutiny between religions, whether it's when it's between science and religion, then I understand, and that's one of the purposes of doing this weekly vodcast is to approach Islam as a layperson from a rationalist perspective. So I have no issue with what was said in this chapter. They're painting the day of judgment. Now, in the religion, you believe there is a day of judgment, so this is what it could be like. I would also argue, from a rationalist perspective, that there is a point to have a day of judgment, because the rationalist or the positivist or the atheist would say to me, "Prove it. Prove that there is a day of judgment," and I would say, "I can't. I can't prove it. Uh, there's no data that indicates that this will happen." Because if I said to them, "Prove that there's climate change," they could indicate some data which says this data indicates that there can be climate change. If I said to them, "Prove it that the universe is expanding," they would measure how light travels, how stars move, etc., and they'd show me that the universe is expanding. If they said to me, "Prove that there's a day of judgment," I would only point to the religious books and say, "Well, this book says it and that book says it." So rationally, scientifically, I can't prove it to you. But I can also make the argument that a bracket is necessary. If things have started, things have to finish. If the universe is ever expanding, there will come a time where we start questioning how far it can expand. So I was watching Young Sheldon a few days ago, and in one of the episodes, Sheldon's mother has lost her faith, or she's having a crisis of faith. And Sheldon's very young, and he sits next to her and he says, "Do you know, if gravity was slightly stronger, everything would crunch up into a ball?" That's true. If gravity was slightly weaker, everything would fly apart. So the gravity that exists today at its optimal level, there is a strong possibility that there is someone who is navigating and managing that. It can't all be by chance. It can be, but it also can't be. You know, you can make arguments for both. Similarly, how we meet human beings and how we're connected to some of them and not connected to others. There's a lot of navigation that goes here. As a result, human behavior needs to be curtailed. Complete freedom is not only useless, it's dangerous. Anarchy is dangerous. But also dictatorship is dangerous. So I never argue for an absolute except when it's freedom of speech. I never argue for a political absolute. The world has to exist in on the spectrum between the absolutes. We need a method of reprimand because we never reprimand ourselves. You can see the state of Western countries today, how their societies are dissolving and devolving into chaos. And I say that living in Montreal, and if you believe that I'm making an Occidental judgment of being from the East and making a judgment by the West, firstly, I grew up in England, so my judgment is not purely Eastern, it's also British. But secondly, you can ask people who live here. You can measure the happiness index. You can assign quite a few measures. Look at the state of America. How many 70% or over 70% of criminals come from fatherless homes? How many members of the black community don't have absentee fathers? How many members have children before marriage or out of wedlock and premarital? There's so many things that are going wrong with the US, and I understand US and maybe the UK and even Canada and other countries. And even though through their media and through the argumentation, they try to put a positive spin on it, but they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker. You could look at what happened at the Oscars with Will Smith, what happened with Johnny Depp and his trial, what's happening with Elon Musk. There's so many things happening in the Anglophone West. I comment on the Anglophone West because linguistically I can understand it much better. So you need some sort of warning or a cap to regulate behavior, because human beings, although they can self regulate every given moment of time, we don't. We forget. Just look at this example. COVID is still around, but we've stopped wearing masks actively. Some people still wear them, but most people don't. And life has gone exactly back to normal. Some places, like buses and trains, still have the mask mandate, but otherwise, most people have stopped using Purell. Around me, they've stopped using it. Some of them carry it, but they've always been careful people. But most people have stopped using Purell. Most people have stopped wearing masks. Most people are now getting close, and it's almost like the last 2 years didn't even happen. As human beings, our memories are very short. We remember surprisingly little about the entire world. So, some sort of a reprimand like this is necessary of the day of judgment, which keeps us in check. But even that, as you know, is not enough. That's why you get messengers. That's why you get people proselytizing. You get people spreading the message. So I don't have the answer, but I have some semblance of a direction. But I'm going to stop here because it's gone on long enough. Thank you so much for joining me today. Some people write to me on LinkedIn in messages or Facebook, and they ask me questions. I'm happy to answer all your questions. If you want to come on live while I'm speaking, feel free to write in the comments and I'll answer your questions there too. And if I don't know, I'll say I don't know. But I'm always willing to explore. I think religion can be a great exploratory exercise because it's our way of understanding God and the universe through words that have come from on high. As believers, that's what we believe. But at the same time, mathematics and physics is our way of understanding the world and the cosmos. And I don't see how they both can't exist simultaneously because they're both exploratory exercises. And same with spirituality and mindfulness and being one with the soul of the universe is also exploratory. It's not definitive. It's not like you tap into the soul and then you are all knowing. No, you're learning. You're on a journey, which is religion, which is science, and which is this. So I encourage people to cross pollinate in terms of ideas. And I'd be happy to do the same. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful Friday, wonderful weekend.